3, 2.
Good evening, everybody. This is Jeff with Junior Hockey Advisor. Tuesday, not a night we normally do a live stream on, but didn't want to get involved with any kind of hockey that's going on right now, so I thought Tuesday would be a great time to do it. And I thought we had a lot to talk about. The drafts are over, and we could kind of get our hands around this a little bit. Thank you for being patient. I know I'm a couple minutes late jumping on here, but actually I'm doing pretty good. I am only 2 minutes late, so I appreciate you sticking around. Let's set the tone. Let's set the stage of what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the last draft, the NAHL draft. We're going to talk about that in perspective to what's going on in the overall hockey community, and then we're going to jump into, okay, I didn't get drafted. What do I do now? Okay, we're going to get into some different thoughts and strategies. Some of you have already put some comments on that are pretty interesting, and I'm going to agree with some. I'm going to disagree with them. So who am I and why am I here? My name's Jeff Colson. For over 35 years, I've been involved as an owner, as a general manager, as a coach, as an NCAA coach. I've been involved at most of the levels, including pro hockey at different levels. I've had kids that have gone through this. I've had relatives that have experienced a lot in hockey. So I've kind of put it all together. Master certified coach. And what I try to do for you here is give you an idea of the process and the paths that you have in front of you, potential process and paths. And so by doing what we do here, we try to make it easier to understand junior hockey. That's it. We make it the point where you can ask questions, where you can get some insight, some unbiased, with just a little bit of bias. I have to be full disclosure. I do work as a director of player development for a NAHL team, and I have been doing that for a little bit of time. So with that said, let's jump into this. Let's talk raw numbers first. Jump on with your comments. I think most of you are probably have been here before. Audience is small for tonight. It's a Tuesday. I'm sure that's why. We don't normally have a Tuesday show, but I'm going to jump up and throw my comment page up so I can see it and just say hi. Charles, good to see you. Thank you for jumping on. Rich, thank you for seeing you. If you got comments, you got questions, toss them on. I'll be glad to jump into them as soon as I can. All right, some numbers to throw at you. This was a very interesting NAHL draft. Let's just look at it in perspective to the last few years. It is the smallest by number, which is ironic's not the right word, which is unusual because because there's added teams, there's 29 teams drafting now, you'd think that this would be one of the largest drafts. It is the smallest draft going all the way back to 2018. This year, the draft was 214 kids. 2018 is the year, 214 is the amount of players that were taken in the draft. Last year, now remember, there was a original draft, and then with the new teams coming in, there was a supplemental draft. So last year we had two drafts for a total of 328 players. So, 214 versus 328, that's a huge swing in the amount of players not only drafted, but were needed, because these drafts are all about filling needs of teams. The year before that, 2020, it was 330. So we had 2 years, roughly 330 kids drafted in each one of those years. The year before that, 252, and then you go all the way back to 2018. That's 5 drafts ago. The number was 210 kids. The league was smaller then. So what's interesting about that? Well, it's extremely interesting because I think this what we're seeing with the amount of draft picks. Remember, the draft is the last piece. You have returning players, tenders, and use the average of 10 tenders per team. That number fluctuates with trades. It fluctuates with different things that the league will do to incentivize a team to participate in more in the NA3HL or the NAPHL. So, but let's just say the number's 10, average 10. So you got returning players, 10 tenders. then you supplement up to the number 34 with your drafts. So, for example, if I have 10 returning players and I have 10 tenders, that equals 20. 34 minus 20 gives me 14 draft picks, so I pick in the 14 rounds. If I've got 20 returning players and 10 drafts, those add up to 30. I would get 4 picks in the draft, so I'd only participate in 4. Now, once again, the draft can be changed too because teams can trade their draft picks up and down, or trade for a player. They can trade for cash. They can do a lot of things. So, but on average, you see that the draft numbers here, well less than 10 on average per team in this draft. So what is that speaking to? I think this is speaking to the whole NCAA picture right now. What's the NCAA picture right now? Well, we did see some contraction with the pandemic. We had announcements of teams that were going to open up and become Division I teams, but we saw some contraction there. That was Alabama. That was Alaska. We saw some delays. We heard of some programs that were going to open up and be D1 programs that didn't happen. So we saw a little bit of contraction, but we saw a portal open up. And if you're not familiar with the portal, it's always been in Division III hockey. You could transfer on the spot. I could leave School 1, go to School 2. I don't lose eligibility. I keep moving on with my playing career and my academics. Well, in other sports, it used to be you made a transfer. If you weren't happy at School 1, you transferred to School 2. You sat out a year, and then you had whatever remaining eligibility. So if I had 4 years, I used one at this first school, 3 years left, I lose a year of eligibility, then I'd have 2 to use after that. Now, things have changed with this portal. Things have changed in the NCAA drastically over the last 2 years. But the big change is the portal and instant ability to keep your eligibility and move. So you've got this backlog of players now that you can move for many reasons. You can move because you didn't have playing time. You can move because you want a different academic situation. You can move because there's too many players on your team and you see a need over there. Mostly you see grad students moving. So I get my 4-year degree done in 3. I got a year left, and I'm at, let's say I'm at North Dakota, and I know that Boston College has got a really good chance of making a run. Maybe I transfer over for that last year and play at Boston College. So that's legal to do now. Now, you throw on that the super senior status, which is all the players during the pandemic. The NCAA basically said you can play 1 more year, because no matter if your team played all the way through the pandemic, you can still get 1 more year of eligibility. So those two things combined have added a logjam of players available for NCAA Division I teams. So either a player stays around longer than you expected, that's a spot. That's a spot that's being used that there would have been a freshman in. So if you're logjam at that level, it trickles down into some D3 hockey too. But what it also does is it trickles down into the different leagues, the junior leagues. In other words, maybe there was a player that's an 02 or an 03 out there that would have normally gone this next season. Now he's sticking around for 1 more year in juniors, awaiting his spot because there was a super senior taking his spot, or a grad transfer is taking his spot. Different reasons for that. So I hope that makes sense a little bit. Tell me what your thoughts are on that. I'm not sure if I've got the full answer on that, but that seems to make the most sense on why, when we've got the most NAHL teams ever, and we've got one of the smallest drafts ever, it only seems to make sense that we're keeping and retaining more players than we normally would for a league that has extremely high ability to put players into Division I hockey. So give me your thoughts on that. Tell me what you say. I see Michael's on from Des Moines. Good to see you. I see Charles on from Massapequa. Very good. Perry's on from Long Island. Good to see you. Mike on from North Virginia. Good to see all of you folks. Thank you for jumping in tonight. So I also wanted to go through, now you got a sense of, okay, we got a real small, only a couple hundred kids taking this draft. What is that? What is that? What does that break down to? What is it made up of? Now, in the tender process, and I'll break down the tenders at some point. I'm not going to do it right now. I'll break down what what made up the tenders as far as where'd they come from. Do they come from U18? What we know in tenders is tenders are usually completed during the season, or right after the season, because you'll see some of the junior players in the CCHL and the AJHL jump on a tender contract as soon as their team is done and their commitment to whatever CJHL league they're in is done. They might commit right away via a tender. Now, tenders are done in the spring, let's just say, well before the draft comes into play, or I should say up until the draft. But tenders tend to be graduating prep players that know they're going to go to juniors the next year, Minnesota high school seniors, Tier 1 elite players or U18 players in general, because you'll see the NAPHL, you'll see the Beast, you'll see the HPHL, and you'll see Tier 1 elite. All those have their fair share, but it's a more traditional route when you're going through with a tender. You're going for a younger player mostly. Then all of a sudden the draft comes in. Now, here's the biggest thing. 200 kids in the draft, 5, 10, 15, 20, 23 of those. So well over 10% of the draft came from the USHL. So you say, why? Why would anybody draft a USHL player? Does that make any sense to draft them? Now, I had a little note here, and I've already lost it, breaking down the tenders and how they looked. I think I just found it. Okay. So USHL, 10, 11% there. The CJHL. Oh, let me answer that question. I threw a question out to you. Man, oh man, I feel like I feel like I should be running a political press conference where a question's tossed out, and doesn't matter which party, they always answer a different question than the one that's out in front of them. The question is, USHL, what is the purpose of drafting a USHL player? Numerous reasons you draft a USHL player. Number one is the USHL is restricted on the amount of players that are going to age out. That means they're 20-year-old players. Since the rosters can only handle a few of those players, and maybe you had 6 or 8 players on your team that were at that last year or coming into their last year, so it'd be the 2002 age group, you may, by talking to coaches, by talking to advisors, by talking to players, you might find out that a player is not going to be asked to come back to that team. And it's very, very difficult as an age-out player to find a home in the USHL. Even if you were a productive member of the USHL, they're only going to keep the cream of the crop. That's just the way it is. So you'll find some USHL players that'll move back down and back down. They move into the North American Hockey League. They'll move into the BCHL because they have 1 year left, and they're not. Their class is the class that they committed to is 1 year out. So that happens. That's one reason. Another reason is a team may just tell a player, hey, we don't expect to have a spot for you. Remember, there's always really good rookies coming into the league. And if you're not holding your weight and excelling, it's very easy to get replaced. It's no different than the NHL. It's no different than the NBA. A great class of rookies comes in. There's going to be people losing jobs in the NHL, the NBA. It doesn't matter what pro league. It's the same thing here. And players have to find other homes. So that's another reason to do it. There's another reason why a player might leave the USHL. He might be a USHL role player, and he would be a different fit in the North American Hockey League. So maybe he's playing a third or fourth line role in the USHL, and he's got skill. He's got enough skill to play in the North American Hockey League. Or another reason is sometimes college coaches have a conversation with a player and say, hey, look, we like what you're doing, but you've got very limited ice time on that team. We would like to see you expand that. Maybe you should explore the North American Hockey League. Other times, a North American Hockey League team will just take a chance that they think that a kid will come to them, and they'll just randomly, it's not random, there's an educated guess that they can get a kid and entice him to come to a North American Hockey League team. But there's always a little bit behind it. I don't think there's ever just a complete roll of dice on a player that you haven't either talked to the team, talked to the college, because remember, most of these kids are are already drafted, committed to a D1 team. So you're going to be in a situation where there's a lot of intel, there's a lot of information that flies around. There's also some deception going on because players might want to angle for a certain North American Hockey League team. So they might tell everybody that, no, I'm not going anywhere, and know that there's one team that'll draft them in the team that they want to be on. It's a chess match played nationwide, three-dimensional, in different time zones at all times. So it's an extremely fun process going through recruiting teams and building teams. But I tell you what, it's very long days, and it's arduous at best. Let's talk about some other groups that have gone in the draft, so you kind of get a sense of the size and scope. NA3HL players, all teams are required to do that. If you look at it, the number's off by 3 or 4 players. I guarantee every team drafted as required by the league. What happens sometimes, though, is if they ended with a NAHL team, in other words, they were rostered up on the NAHL team for the last X amount of games, they're picked up on the draft sheet as a NAHL player, or maybe they played games with their high school team or something. They might be listed on as a high school player too. So, but that makes up 14% of the draft. So, just between the USHL and the NA3HL players, there's a 25% of the draft is just in those areas. So let's talk about junior hockey in general. CJHL, this is the AJHL, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, all the junior leagues in the Ontario area, in the Q. I don't think anybody came from the Maritime this year, but you take all the CJHLs less the BCHL. They made up, CJ had 12, the CCHL had 12, the OJ had 11. So there's 23, 33. So about 33 there, which I think 33 would make up about, let's do the math. Hang on one second. Always helps to have so 33 divided by 214 equals about 15% of the draft came from Canadian junior hockey. And there's a couple floaters in there. There's 2 kids taken from the Gojo, which is the Greater Ontario League, one step below the CCHL. And then you got the BCHL on there. So the BC had 5 or 6 players taken, which I thought was fairly low. But once again, this wasn't a big draft. This absolutely wasn't a big draft. NCDC, 17 players taken from the NCDC. I thought that was fairly high, from previous drafts, and what that league has to offer right now. I thought they did very well in this draft. So once again, if you take the NCDC and the CJHL, you in the BCHL and the USHL, that's half your draft is coming from players that have got junior experience, and some of them from extremely high level junior programs. So, is this weighted against a player coming out of lower level hockey? Absolutely. It's extremely tough to get drafted, especially when the draft is contracted by almost a third. Over a third. So when you see a contraction in the draft and you've got the ability to pull players in from other leagues like this, now not every kid that was drafted from the USHL is going to end up in this league. Some of them, the teams took flyers on and are taking a chance on. Not every kid from the BCHL. Probably when you start talking about kids that are from the other junior leagues, there's probably been a lot of homework done and a lot of conversations to make sure that's a good fit and that they're actually going to report to camp and want to play in the North American Hockey League. So sans the USHL and maybe the BCHL, the rest of those kids are probably report to main camps, and you'll get a good fit. So once again, that number is still over half. That's a big number. I'm going to just do the math real quick. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Okay, so we're pushing 90 without the NA3HL players that came from other junior leagues. Incredibly high number. Prep only made up 10, 20, 20, 24 players came from prep. Minnesota High School made up 15 players. So other high schools made up 7. Big number for U16s. A big number, meaning 13, 14 kids came from U16. Not usual. The league is not known for bringing in U16 players. And then overall, U18, 25, 27 players came from U18. So to give you a sense, not a lot of U18 players, not a lot of prep compared to your tender list. Now remember, if you look at this draft was 214 players. How many players go on the tenders? Tenders, you're going to get more. I think the tender number was closer to 350, 370 this year as far as the amount of players tendered. You go, well, Jeff, that doesn't add up. Why would there be so many tenders this year? Two factors. Remember, you can earn a tender because you're a really positive, influential program inside of junior hockey as far as the NA3HL, the NAPHL, and other things. If you're coordinated with the showcases, if you're participating with your staff coming to these events, and you're working as a good citizen inside the whole NAHL umbrella, you can pick up another tender. Okay, you can trade for tenders. You can pick up tenders that way. So some of these tenders may have been tenders that a team picked up from 2 years ago or 3 years ago. That's why they have more than their normal allocated amount. The bottom line is, you've got 580 new players showing up to main camps if everybody shows up, and 370 of them were picked before the draft. So the draft is a little bit of a cherry on top this year versus normally it's closer to 50-50. Normally we've seen 300 and 330 kids getting drafted, and that the tenders and the drafts were like this. This year, the drafts are just lower. That's just the way it is. So anyway, if you have any questions on that, put them up. Let's see them. Tony, good to see you from St. Louis. Hey, it's good to see the group grow as the broadcast goes on. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what the heck does all this mean. I'm just checking the different sources to see if we've got other people that have questions from our other boards that are, because we're on different platforms of Facebook and we're on different areas here. So I'm just checking to see. All right, Tony, I'll throw yours on. If your kid attends a USHL main camp and a NAHL team seems pretty interested and tells us he's just too young right now and asks to stay in touch with communication through the fall, are they serious? If so, what would they be looking for? So, Tony, that's very legitimate. That happens all the time. In 06, can I share a screen? If I can share a screen, I'm going to try this. You got to bear with me, folks. If I can share a screen, I will do it right now, and I will give you a little insight on something here. So I am going to try to see what screens I have available to me, and if I can do this. I don't think I have a screen available. Give me a second. I'll see if I can do this. Not there. Okay, there's a screen, and that's screen share. And let me see if I can just change this screen to my other screen. And if I can. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to run you through something pretty quick here just to give you an idea. All right, let's go to the North American Hockey League. I'm using Elite Prospects. I'm already signed in, so I've got their package is. It's a little bit higher, the premium package or whatever. I spend $8-10 a month on this. But if I just go in here and type in North American Hockey League, and some of you, this is boring because we've done this. Okay, there's the Elite Prospects North American Hockey League page. And if I'm looking at that page, I want to make sure that you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing here. Okay, if I'm looking at this page here, and I go down past the standings and I go to the player stats, I can, first of all, just this front page got a ton of stuff. It gives you the player stats. It gives you the records. It gives you the breakdown from nationalities. And then you go down a little bit more. It starts giving you some really cool stuff. The transactions, who's free agents, player nationalities, comparison of teams by experience, how many games they have under the belt at the NAHL level, their height and weight, average age. This is pretty cool stuff. Not sure everybody uses this. Then you get some really interesting facts towards the bottom here. Who was the oldest player in the league? Who was the youngest player in the league? Okay, so this is a good one to use. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were two 16-year-olds that played any time at all this year in the NAHL. And then you've got a couple of 17-year-olds. And I'm going to give you a little bit more detail on that. But I don't know anything about this player, and I usually don't like picking out a player. But he was the youngest, so I guess he's already notorious. So if we look at him and look and see what his season looked like, he got a third to a half of a season in with Northeast this year. That's not bad. But let's just go back and look at one thing. And I see where you're going with this, but I just want to give you I want to give everybody, the whole audience, a sense of how hard it is to be a young player. And then I'll answer the rest of that question for you, Tony. I appreciate you being patient with me as I play with my toys here. What I want to do right here is this is a filter you can put on. What I did was I clicked on that list of all the players in the league. And now, oh boy, what year? I got to figure out the years. What is, you said he's an 06. So if I just go into birth year and type in 2005, and this is just for you to kind of get a sense, not the person asking the question, but the whole audience to get a sense. Now I'm filtering out this league to see how many 05s played this year. Okay, so 05s that played, you see that there was 8 that made rosters at one point or another. 5 played, of which 1, 2, 3, 4 got a couple games in, and then 1 player played 26 games. That's it. That's it for the 05 class, which would be the 06 coming in. You got 2 goalies that saw a total of 4 games. So this is obviously not a young league. So what does it mean and what can you do with that information? There's absolutely interest from that team. If they're coming up and talking to you and says, hey, we're watching you, they're just putting their name in the hat and making sure that you're aware that they're interested. There's definitely interest there. What can you do with that? Do you stay in touch? Absolutely. It's easy to send an email. Put your video up, and let me get out of this screen now because I did what I wanted to do. Put your video up on YouTube, on a YouTube channel. Send them a link of a 30-second highlight each month, a minute highlight each month. Say hello. Show up to their events. Go to a game if you got a weekend where you can get to a game. Do whatever you can to stay in touch with that staff because sooner or later, even with a player that's young, if they're talented, they're going to call them up for games. They're going to let them affiliate with the team. They might invite you down for a week so you can go down and skate, maybe skate and play in a game on the weekend, all contingent on the team. Different teams at the NAHL level do it different ways, but it's legitimate when they reach out like that. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be, and the way to actually handle that is to communicate. Now, your son's young. It can be every coach says, hey, we want to hear from the player. We want to hear from the player. That doesn't mean you as a parent can't nudge a player at that age because honestly, not every player understands the communication path. And if it's not right in front of them, they don't understand the long-term part of this, that it could be 2 years before they make juniors at that age, possibly 3. Now, if you're a real talented player, it's not going to be 2 or 3 years. So I hope that helped a little bit. Just curious to read the question here. I was just curious to see how he's playing, or should he just ask them what they're looking for here? But yeah, look, they're probably not going to steer you too much. If you're a super talented player at that age, they're not going to start telling you to change their game. Remember that he's probably going to play for a quality team at that level, whatever organization he's with for next season in the fall. They're going to build a relationship with that coach, let them know they're interested, and let them know they're watching. But, coaches don't like to get in a situation where they start giving you too much coaching, okay, until you're under their wing. They might say, like, hey, look, we watched you play. We'd like to see your hustle a little bit better. We'd like to see you a little more aggressive. We think you're too aggressive. They might give you a little bit of sense like that. But don't worry about that stuff. Worry about the communication and let it just play out and keep doing what you're doing. Because obviously you're getting into a USHL main camp and you got NAHL coaches watching you too. You're on the right path. You're going in the right direction. But remember, the numbers are even smaller when we talk about the USHL on top of this pyramid than the NAHL. So when we're talking about these NAHL numbers, we've already covered the USHL. It's a tough game, but you're in the fight. You're in the middle of it, and let me know if there's anything else you want answered on that. I'll be glad to jump in. So, what can you do? Okay, that was the premise of tonight's broadcast. So we know all this information. We know that we've got a situation where it's contracted as far as the players. The upward mobility isn't there the way it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. There's frustration on these numbers, and maybe you got left on the outside of this. So what is it? I want to cover one more thing before we get to that, before we get to the what do we do. And I think it's important. Draft positioning. This is not the NBA, it's not the NFL, and it's not the NHL. First round, last round, yes, there might be a little bit of, I'm not going to play for a team that doesn't take me in the first round in the NAHL. Maybe a little. Maybe a couple of kids will get offended if they don't get drafted in the first round. But there's severely talented players that get drafted late from the BC, from the USHL. It doesn't really matter because remember, you don't get more money or anything by getting drafted in the first or last. What you're trying to do is you're trying to make a team. You got to get the main camp, and once again, all gloves are off. You're in a bare knuckle fight to make the squad. So, no, I'm not saying you have to fight to make an all team. That's we'll talk about that in a second. But the point is, don't worry about draft positioning. Okay, some would argue that even if you're in the first round, you're actually in the 11th round because 10 tenders were already picked. Now, there's a misnomer to that because some of those tenders could be talked to during the season, and some of the players can't be talked to until their season was over, so they weren't even really around during the tender process. So depending on what league they're playing at and how they're getting in there. Oh, and I didn't throw the number out, but I also wanted to let you know that there was a certain amount of players that came from Europe, and the Europe number was 13. There's 13 kids that came from Europe. So I know I'm jumping all over. Just bear with me. I'll get to a continuous path here in a second. But we get back to what do you do now? Now, I saw the comment on a couple different things. Well, just get back to work. Okay. If I'm in law school, if I get a bad grade, do I just read more? Do I just go out and start writing more? That's a little too generic to say just go out and work. You've all heard the saying working harder or working smarter. In this case, if you think you're right on the edge and you think you should have been drafted, you think you're in that, I can tell you right now, I wished I could share with you our draft board, which I can't, but I can tell you, here's how a draft board works on many teams. Not everybody, because everybody does it differently. But we have a spreadsheet that is a column of players for every round that we have drafted. Now, not only do we have a spreadsheet of our picks the way we would like to see the board picked, but we have alternate picks that go across the board. So if we go into, and we didn't have a first round pick, but let's say we have a first round pick. We go in the first round and somebody picks the person we have. Well, we have a second first round pick and then a third first round pick and a fourth because, we were the number one team in the league this year. There's 28 teams going in front of us in the first round. So, and it was even worse for us this year because we didn't have a first round pick. We were in the second round. So we had to watch, 40, 50 kids go before our first pick. The reason why it's a matrix that's two-dimensional versus one is because that first round pick, we might have other players there that we know won't make it to the next round, or we really are confident that they'll be gone, but they might still be in the first round. In the second round, the reason why we go lateral on it is we got our first round pick and then a backup, knowing that going into the second round, there's a good chance that all those players are going to be gone. So in the second round, we've got the same thing. We got our first pick in the second round and backup. Now, if that first round, if we get the pick we want and nobody else picked number 2 and number 3 and number 4 in the first round, those players can swing down into the second round, into the third round, and the fourth round, and it pushes our list down. So the whole time this is going on, there's 4 men manning phones all on a Zoom call and working the draft board at the same time, and we're working out this matrix as this is going on. At the same time, we're all talking to coaches, college coaches. We're talking to advisors. We're talking to other junior programs, and this is all going, and players too, and parents. This is all going on live as the draft moves. So this draft is not just a matter of taking a piece of paper and going, "There's our first pick. Let's pick that player." It's pretty extensive. The reason I bring that up is because there are players that we absolutely thought were going to draft this year that we didn't get to. Because we had some picks on the board that other teams didn't take that we assumed they were going to get to. But this contracted draft, because it's a third smaller, we had about an extra 30% of players that we thought were going to be drafted didn't go drafted. So we'll invite them to camp. We'll try to get them going the way we think they can get going, but they just weren't on the draft, our final draft this year. And this happened to everybody. Everybody had great players, large quantities of great players left over because of the way this draft went this year. So you prepare with many, many more players that you're very comfortable can play in the league that you might not get to on the draft list. And clearly this year, that's the case. That's the way this draft works. So, hey, Jacob, good to see you. I'm glad you jumped on. Throw your thoughts on. Tell me what you think about some of the things I've told you. I've kind of given you some backdoor information. I've given you some statistics, but I really want to get to our topic is, what does it mean to not get drafted and not get tendered, and where do you go from there? Number one, if I had an explosive graphic video right now with a great studio voice that could come on and go, number 1. Boom, there it is, number 1. What's the first thing you've got to do is you've got to reset and get on the phone. You've got to get on social media. You've got to get on your email path. You got to reach out to NAHL teams. Every NAHL team right now, every North American Hockey League team right now going into main camps is not full. I guarantee you, if you're truly in that zone of a player that was, in the bubble, meaning you were on lists to be considered for the draft and you didn't get drafted, you have absolutely every opportunity right now to jump on and get on the horn and find yourself a main camp. Okay, we just had a meeting earlier today talking about how many players we're inviting and where we're getting them, and all of us already have our list because that was our draft list. So we're working on that draft list to get those players in that we considered worthy of a draft. Every team's like that. There is no team that I can tell you right now. There is no team that's going, "Oh, we're full right now." Now, the up we are full right now might come if you're a A-level player or a AA level player and you've never played AAA hockey. You might hear that. I can't help that. But if you're truly one of those players that fall into that you're still in that bandwidth, I should say. The standard deviation away from the perfect NAHL player on either side, you're still within a standard deviation or two. That player just needs to be on the phone. He needs to be working it. He needs to be emailing. He needs to be calling. He needs to be finding main camps. Okay? Is one main camp going to get you into the NAHL? No. You got to assume that you've got to go to, if you're that good, you got to go to 2 or 3 camps. The first one might hit, but it's going to be the second one or the third one, or it may not work out. But you got to go out there swinging. You've got to get in the game and go out there swinging. You can't do it. Pardon my French, this bullshit about if you're good enough, they'll find you. We already all found you, okay? Somebody's got you on a list. If you're that player, there's probably 200 players, 300 players that were draft worthy that didn't get drafted. Okay, that's the bottom line. Do I have the statistics to prove that? No. But I know what this team was doing. I know what this team was doing. I know what our team was doing. I know what our numbers were as far as how many players that we pool together that we think are draft-worthy players. So if you're in that draft-worthy situation, you got to go out swinging now. You've got to go out there with a little bit of hunger, and that hunger comes from getting on the cones and saying, I want to be in your main camp. I want to be a part of this. I want to prove to you I can play on this. Now, what you need to understand is every team is going to take, excuse me, every team is going to take free agents, okay? There are going to be players that were not veteran players, that were not drafted and were not tendered, are going to make rosters. I guarantee it, okay? Can I say 100% of NAHL teams are going to take free agents? There's no way I can guarantee that, but I can guarantee you it's going to happen, okay? That there's going to be a lot of free agents on there. Some teams will take one, some teams will take 3, 4, 5, but there's opportunities there, okay? And that's why you can't just sulk on this situation and go, oh, they told me they were going to draft me. Okay, if they didn't get to you, so be it. Boom, get on the phone, get on the social media, get on the email, and start finding yourself some main camps to go to get on a roster. So how do you know which one to pick? How do you know which main camp to go to? Now, there is no way for me or anybody else out there. Maybe there's some advisors that are working their butt off right now finding homes, but advisors tend to find their sweet spot with several teams that they really work well with, and they don't really do, there's nobody that's calling every single team. And oh, by the way, if you're one of our advisors, we have a couple hundred advisors as part of our group. Don't expect that if you email programs the day of the draft with these 4 players are surefire good bets and nobody on the list we've heard of, we don't have time to vet those, and we're not going to take, if we've never talked to you and you're an advisor trying to make a living doing this and you haven't already reached out and done your homework for the last several months trying to get your kids on lists and being looked at and getting vetted for drafts and tenders, don't try to do it on the last day. It doesn't work. Okay, those emails, were briefly read and discarded because it just isn't going to work that way. It's just like anything else. I'm not going to, bet on this horse that I've never seen before when I know this horse over here has already won 2 of the 3, Triple Crown events. Okay, it just doesn't work that way. So that's an aside. Let's get back to what we're talking about. One of the questions that come up here. Okay, a couple of things. David asked the question, what is the skill set you look for when drafting? I'm gonna get to that one. Let's get through the marketing side of it, and I'll get back to the skill set. David, good question on that, and we'll talk about the draft skill set because that's going to be a difficult one to answer real quick. Somebody else says, is this any different for goalies? Everything's different for goalies. Yes and no. Yes and no. Is it different? It is, because there is no. It's so much easier to pattern out statistics with, and goalie people usually are statistic people or like to live in that world. And that's not a knock. But remember, there's a limited amount of goalies in this league. We're talking, through the whole camp process, there'll be a very finite number, and there's a bigger, pool of players. So there's more trends and there's more things you can say. Teams tend to look for this and teams tend to look for that. Remember, I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen goalies that do something in a main camp or do something in a game where a Division I coach will go, I want him. In 30 seconds, have already made their mind up. You normally don't see that with defensemen and forward, where people make a decision on the spot that they want that kid in the program. But I've seen it with goalies more than any other position in hockey, where there's instant decisions and instant mind made up on a player. Goalies can have a rally. They can have a burst of great play that pushes them through in a main camp, on a tryout basis, and on their film, and in the playoffs, wherever it is. I got to tell you, I can only give you the experience that I have. Goalies have more eyes on them, and what I mean by that is I don't think anybody. We have an excellent goalie coordinator that handles the scouting of our goalies. Very influential voice in the room. That voice is put against the head coach. That's put against the associate head coach. It's put against myself and my counterpart. There's a lot of people. That get an opinion on the goalies. That doesn't happen as much with players. Players, there's players that I'll recommend in the program, and boom, they get right through the line, and boom, they're where they're supposed to be. That doesn't happen with goalies as much. So little tougher to answer on that one. I'm gonna bring in a goalie expert. I'm gonna have to really break down the USHL and the North American Hockey League and lower level goalie opportunities and how those doors open up. Remember too, just like advisors, goalies tend to have their own personal trainers. I always recommend, when I say personal trainers, private lessons, clinics, doing things. A lot of goalies will work in the summer for a goalie camp with their goalie guru, whoever that is, respectively out there. I always recommend to make sure you're playing that card. If that person's connected, which you hope they are, that they have connections with college programs, that they have connections with junior programs, that you're playing that card to make sure your name is getting put out there because of the work you're putting in with your goalie guru. And that is not a derogatory term. That's just basically what it is. There's pockets of goalie gurus all over North America. So that one we could go on all day, but I'm going to jump on to some other questions here. Thanks for that question, though. Matt asks, if you don't make it out of main camp, can it hurt you next year if you play a certain spot or team? Example, USPHL Premier or Elite. Is it better to play on a low Premier team or a high Elite team? I can tell you this: you just go through the draft, you're going to see very few players coming out of Elite or Premier for the North American Hockey League. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It's just those numbers are, without actually having them here in front of me, I didn't break that out. I bet you that number is less than 5 or 6 players that came directly from those leagues. So that's a tough jump. There's a different opportunity there would be NCDC to jump from Elite Premier to NCDC. And then NCDC has a real good percentage of players that move over to the North American Hockey League. So yeah, it is out of main camp. If you don't make it, can it hurt you if you play in those leagues? It's a relative term, hurt, because is it where you should be placed? Are you a elite or premier level player? Well, if you're a premier level player and you're a good premier level player, maybe the opportunity isn't in the Premier League because the Manitoba, Saskatchewan, the OJHL, the CCHL, the AJHL, all these leagues are a step above the Premier, and in many cases rival or are above the NCDC. There's no doubt about it. With numbers right now, the CCHL, the AJHL, maybe even the OJHL are producing more Division I players than the NCDC. So, getting into the NCDC is not the only opportunity there. You can also look at some of the Canadian Junior Hockey League opportunities, and in some of these situations like the AJHL, and all of them overall, I don't know about this upcoming season, but you're usually significantly cheaper, even as a billeted player, significantly cheaper than playing East Coast Tier 3 junior hockey. So there's awesome opportunities to play for some great programs in Canada if you're old enough and you're ready for that jump. So I would say, is it bad to play, in the Premier Elite? If you're trying to get into the NAHL, I would highly recommend as an American. Now, remember, here's a perfect example. I've got lists right here. I'm not going to actually show you the list, but I'm going to show you how many. There's our whole draft list, which is about 20 pages long. But if you notice these are all of our, you remember those pre-drafts that, are, money makers? That's why I've got like 26 pages of notes on players, and we had 8 staff members at that pre-draft. It's a cash cow. We make money on them. But that's not why I'm just saying that because it frustrates me. AJHL list right here. I've got all the Americans in the AJHL. We track all Americans in that league. I've got the CCHL There's not as many Americans in that league. I've got those right here. I've got the BCHL, and I've also got just in front of me. I've got the NCDC too. Don't make it sound like we don't do that there. But the point is, and why not the Canadians? Well, we do track Canadians, but this year, because and this is just in our situation with the team I'm involved with, we had already, we had allocated amount of foreign players already. We really didn't have room to go deep into that market. So we were looking mostly at the Americans up there. And we always look at the Americans first because we have, we can have as many Americans on the team as we can up to the allotted number we can have, the restricted level. So we're always going to look for Americans first. So that question you asked again, Matt, about will it hurt you? It's relative to where you want to end up. If you think that the track is taking you to D3 hockey, and you want to stay on the East Coast, the USPHL Elite or Premier can get you there. I'm not saying will, but it can get you there, and you still have the path to the NCDC and the EHL. If you're trying to get into the NAHL, it's going to be a tough road to go that way. Not saying it's impossible. I'm just going to say it's a tough road. So good question. Thank you, Matt. Chris, great information. Hello from San Diego. This is from Chris. My kid is a 16U getting ready for the next steps. This information is fantastic. You're welcome, Chris. I'm glad we could help you tonight. Thank you for jumping on. Liz says, my 04 goalie graduated from high school without having any AAA or travel experience, never gotten scouted. He's gone to main camps and has been the third goalie when they're looking for two, or the second goalie when looking for one. How can he approach this lack of pedigree? He does have private lessons and elite camps. He's running out of time and opinions and advice. And when will you have your goalie guest speaker come on? Oh, no, now I'm getting my feet are getting held to the fire. As you know, I'm not a big fan of guests because my opinion is the ultimate opinion in hockey. No, that's not the reason I don't do guests. I love controlling content and being unbiased. I've, in many years of doing hockey-related broadcasts before this live stream that I do now, I had guests on all the time, and it got to be generic. The guests would give me generic answers. It's like doing an interview with a pro player in between periods or a coach. I would get the canned answers and could never crack the code to get them to show the other side of things. And I like this show to move the curtain out of the way so you can see what's going on behind the scenes. I like this whole process to give you some leverage on getting information you may not get in other places. The reason why guests are difficult when you do this is if they give you cookie cutter answers, now that answer might go against me, which you see the discussion group. I'm not worried about that. That happens all the time when people have other opinions. But if you're trying to stay on path and you're trying to stay going down a true path of being unbiased information, it's really tough with guests at this level. I don't have time to have a producer go out and dig and just find that perfect guest to do this with. But I've got a lot of great guys that are goalie coaches that I think that if I coach them well, they'll say what I want them to say. How's that sound? No, I just want to make sure that I don't do it that it veers us off path on trying to keep everybody locked in on what the direction has to be to make it to the next level. There is no one direction, but there's a pragmatic way of going about this. So hopefully that helps. And let's see let's go back to the lack of pedigree. Look, I don't know if I can help you on the lack of pedigree. If his performance, it's all going to come down to performance at this point. Can it help that you've got that he's doing lessons in elite camps? Absolutely, but you got to ask. In other words, if you're not asking your private lesson instructor and you're not asking that elite camp group of coaches to help you and reach out, I mean, he literally has to walk up and say, hey, I'm still without a home. Where do you know that I can play? Do you have any opportunities that you know of? And you're building that relationship. If he's busting his butt in that camp or if he's busting his butt in the drills and he's at the quality level that can get him there, those guys will reach out for you. They'll go to bat for you. But I don't have enough information to know the style of play. I don't know his work ethic, and those things are not really for me to judge on this broadcast. I'm just saying that's about the only avenue you have is build relationships, keep reaching out, and get in front of people through the main camps. And if you're in enough main camps and you are of quality and you've got people batting for you that vouch for you that are connected, and that's your goalie camp instructors and your private lesson instructors, you get a chance to crack this thing. Not everybody's going to do it, but it's going to be a better chance than if you just sit there and expect your talent level at tryouts to shine by itself. So that's about all I got on that one. That's a tough one. That's a real tough one, Liz. Thanks for asking that question. Jeff from Wisconsin, good to see you on there. All right, here's a good question. Let's throw this one up. Mario asked the question, if you have multiple main camp invites, is there any factors you should focus on to pick which ones to attend? Is waiver or reduction of fee to attend a good deciding factor? Absolutely not. Most USHL teams don't give you a waiver. Most NAHL teams don't give you a waiver, even if you're a veteran player coming back in. We don't. You're going to pay full boat as a free agent, as an invitee, as a tender, as a draft, as a veteran. So, yes, there are teams that do that. I'm not going to lie. They shouldn't do it because, the NCAA rule is if you give a discount to one player, you have to offer that to every single player. Now, teams don't always abide by that, and that's not my business because, that's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother issue. I'm not here to rat teams out for giving a kid a tuition free at the main camp. However, there's tons of things you can do here to find out which is the better fit for you. One is reverse engineer their roster and go back several years in the roster, especially if it's the same ownership and same coaching staff. See where they get their players from. Look at the height of their players. Look at the size of their players. You can kind of get a sense of, what the coach is like. Do they always build a team 50-50 left-handed to right-handed, or do they give a crap and just go for the best athlete? Do they have two or three big guys and everybody else is 5'10" or less? All these things can be factored out. Do they really like prep players? Do they really like players from Michigan? You can get a sense of where that roster is built from and who they're actually picking just by doing a little bit of homework on that. It's not a bad thing either if you've got a main camp invite to ask the question. This question comes up. Is it irritating when I get this question? Sometimes it's irritating, but I still answer the question. Ask them, how did you find me? What do you like about my game, or what did you see in my son, or what did you see in me if your son's sending it out? And run with that information, run with that. Excuse me one second. Okay. Reverse engineer this. Find the information you need and dig into the team a little bit. How many players are they returning? How many players they draft? What did the draft look like for them? What you can kind of see some teams' needs along the draft. It's harder. You can go into social media and look at their tenders that they announce. Most teams announce their tenders on social media, maybe their website, but there is no official list you can get from the NAHL that tells you, what players were drafted, or, from any other leagues for that matter, or not drafted, but tendered. You can get the draft. You can get that on Elite Prospects. You can get that on the NAHL website. I'm talking about the tenders. But you can go in and look on their social media and see all their tender picks and see what they picked by. But, yeah, you can construct a good scenario. So if you're a right-handed D that is gritty but skilled, and you see that they drafted 3 right-handed D that are all gritty and skilled, maybe you go to the other main camp, because it looks like they might have already put a few kids in front of you. Or you say, well, look, they drafted 3 of those kind of kids. That means there's an opportunity there. So once again, it's also the type of player. I was very, very fortunate to coach a kid named Colin a few years ago. He ended up being the captain at Army at West Point, 2-time All-American. Just this year, he was a 2nd-time All-American, and he signed an NHL contract. And I had nothing to do with it. He was with me for 1 year. I had nothing to do with his talent. He was already talented before I coached him, and he got more talented after he left our program. I just happened to be in his steps up the ladder, okay? I'm not saying this to make it sound like I'm some guru that developed an NHL player. But he was told all the way along the line, yeah, you're never going to do that. And that incited him more to go out there and prove it. There was another pro player from the local area named Marty Reisner that always wanted to go to the last place team. His mentality when he took went to a junior program or a prep program, or he went to a Division I college, he didn't want to go to the best team. He wanted to go to a team that needed him and wanted to prove that he could help that team win and become better. And he did. So there's different kinds of people and different kinds of mindsets out there, but absolutely, the reduction in fee thing, does it mean anything? It could. Yeah, I don't know, because I've never been on that side of the coin where a reduction in fees come into play, and that's not something that coaches and GMs and scouts and player development people, back end people in the sport, sit around talking about over beers. If a team's doing it, they're doing it. Nobody's. That's not my business. So I guess probably there's better ways to answer that, but I hope that helped a little bit. Charles says, my son signed with an SJHL team. Will he be followed by the NAHL? So I just went through every league, including the SJHL. I'm tracking. Yes, as soon as the rosters are out there, we'll also. I'm not sure about showcases. We'll have somebody. We have one scout that their job this year is just to cover that league. Mostly it'll be by watching on hockey TV, but there'll be live games too. But yes, you're absolutely being tracked. If you're playing in any of the CJHL leagues now, with the exception of the SIJHL, which is a Superior International Junior Hockey League, the Quebec League, and the Maritime League, those three leagues don't get as much following, but your AJHL, your MJHL, your SJHL, CCHL, OJHL, and even the Northern Ontario Junior Hockey League, they're all getting good views. They're all getting good views, and of course the BCHL, which is no longer part of the CJHL, they're independent now. They're getting tons of looks too from the NHL down. So yes, you'll be tracked, and there'll be secret eyes on you at all times. Guys walking around with black hats and black capes on and little notepads. So, but yes, there'll be plenty of people watching that league this year. Okay. Matt says, thanks for answering the question, and I'm going to leave it at that so I can get to some other ones. So what is your thoughts on playing a second year in the KIJHL versus going to the USPHL? My son has an opportunity to main camp in the MJHL, but if he doesn't stick around there, would he get more exposure in the USPHL? I kind of answered this, Troy, a little bit earlier. Looking at this and kind of trying to build out a scenario real quick after this. The KIJHL is not a bad league. It's usually a younger players league that the younger talent tends to bolt real quick out of that league. That's because you got the WHL, the AJ, and the BCHL out there. Boom, players are going if they're not coming down to the States. Of that list, obviously the MJ, playing in the Manitoba Junior Hockey League is a phenomenal opportunity, and I would say that sticks out the most to me right there. For the same reasons we were talking about with other people earlier, the USPHL Elite and Premier, remember, that's a closed system. There's leagues for advancement in junior hockey. You're in one right now, KIJHL. Nobody expects super talented players to stay in the KIJHL all the way through. They expect them to veer off into other places as they advance, maybe after 1 year or 2 years. Young players. We're talking, the minimum age I think in that league is 16. Now, a closed system is a league that owns all the steps below them. You've got a league, the USPHL, that owns the 16s, the 14s, the elites, the premiers, the NCDC, and they're really not interested in. I don't build relationships with premier and elite teams because I don't feel comfortable with it. They've got a master. They're saying a slave to a different master is not politically correct, but they're lined up to handle the business of that league, and it's a closed league. It's a league of destination, meaning if you're playing inside the USPHL, that's usually the league that you end up at for the most part. There's not as much extraction out of that league as there is guys staying with that league all the way up, or even just getting log jam into the elite or premier levels. So it has a place in hockey. There are good teams, there's good coaches, but once again, you also get lost in the mix. There's no way in the world, with the amount of elite and premier teams that are in that league, that they can support what they want to support, which is advancing good players up to the NCDC. So Sometimes you just get lost because of the vast numbers in that league. So I would say absolutely try to get into the MJHL. And if that doesn't go, sticking around for a second year in the KIJHL, I think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. If you're making MJ relationships and you're making AJ relationships and Saskatchewan relationships while you're staying up there, that's fine, because all those are opportunities that the KIJHL utilizes, or those leagues utilize the KIJHL. The North American Hockey League is not looking, for the most part, at KIJHL players. That's more of a regional thing, or with what's sandwiched with what is sandwiched around you, with the leagues that are around you. Troy, that's a hard one. I hope that helped a little bit on things. Okay, this is an age-old question. What are your thoughts on the NA3HL compared to the USPHL Premier? It's apples to oranges. There's no way to give it a full, complete comparison, because one is a closed system completely, and that's the USPHL. We just discussed that. But the North American Hockey League has built-in channels of opportunities inside of the program, meaning you know that a player is going to get, every year players get moved up. Every single NAHL team has to draft from the NA3. Every single year they have to tender from the NA3. So there's 60 kids from that league. That's a much smaller league than Premier that are getting advancement opportunities. And those players go to other leagues too. It's not just a closed door. So yes, you can. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. There was a player. I'm not going to say the position. I'm not going to say the team, but he was playing in the USPHL, and he was crushing it numbers-wise, just crushing it. And I mean, I'm talking about record-setting numbers, especially for the position he played. And he was given an opportunity to, come in to get an experience with the North American Hockey League team, and that just the numbers didn't work. What the skill level that it takes to play at the NAHL versus the Premier level, or at the NA3HL level, it takes a lot to get up there. So you can be the very best in that league and still struggle, making the jump to the next level. There are players that make the jump every year, though. Don't get me wrong. There'll be Premier players that end up in the NAHL. Extremely small number. There'll be Premier players that there'll be people that have the Premier League on their resume because they went Premier NCDC NAHL. They went Premier NA3 NAHL. They went Premier CCHL NAHL. So the avenue is always to try to move up and not necessarily stay within the closed system. So my only worry about USPHL Premier is that tends to be a destination, and that's got to be a leapfrog step to get to another league, because like we talked about since the beginning of the broadcast, going from Premier to the NAHL is extremely hard. Going from the Premier to the CCHL or the OJHL is an opportunity that does open up. Going from the OJ or the CC to the NAHL happens, and it happens frequently. We just talked about that earlier. 20, 30 kids, from those two leagues combined. In fact, individually, those are the two highest CJHL leagues. And just do the reverse engineering. Look where those American kids came from, or any of the kids that came down from that league where they originally came from. But so it does happen. It's a great question. All right, I'll do a couple more questions. Man, the questions are flying now. I don't know if I can get through them all, but all right. What's the best advice for a player leaving home and billeting for the first time? He'll be a senior next year and doing school online. And what is some good advice for him leaving home? So, Matt, this is an awesome question. We usually do a whole billeting show a little bit closer, but I'll jump into this right now. See how we're doing on time here. Wow. I'm going to do a couple more questions, and I'm going to have to call it quits. So here's some suggestions on billeting. Teams usually have a billeting coordinator. Some teams at the junior level will, for example, when I was an owner for 2 junior teams, we would have the billet parents all over all the players, and any parents that were in town. We have a barbecue in my backyard, with all of them at the same time. And we cover what it's like to be a billet parent, congratulate the returning billet parents, work with the new billet parents, and introduce the coordinator and set the loose parameters at the party. Just, hey, just a couple things we want to talk about if there's any problems, any issues. But here's some things you can do. One is reach out to the billet parent as soon as you find out who the billet parent is. Set up a call with whatever the parents are, mom and dad. The player can or cannot be on the call. It's probably best that they are on the call. And whoever the decision makers are, sometimes it's only one person of the family, the billet family, that is the decision maker that kind of runs the billet or two that's in the house. Other times it's both parents. But you want to get a parameter of what it's like living in their house. What are some of the ups and what are some of the downs? Set the price, set exactly how meals work. Find out. Now, I'll give you an example. Most know that my son played in the AJ. My youngest son played in the AJ, played in the NAHL. In the AJ, the billeting situations were so opposed to each other. He played on two teams in the AJ, so opposed to each other. One, the family could care less if he ate a meal in their house and barely invited him to dinner. He had a really nice room in their basement that was finished, but barely, they only ate as a family once or twice a week. And they'd go, yeah, Adam, we've got food up here if you want to come up. And he was basically on his own to figure out meals and ate out a lot or went over to other billet houses a lot because that's just the way it was. There was one billet family in the North American Hockey League that had 5 players, 6 players living in there, which USA Hockey says, I think the limit is 2. But there are, families that will have more because they have, big houses with a lot of bedrooms. And they made a vat of oatmeal in the morning, and they would make a vat of spaghetti, like with just spaghetti sauce, for night, and that was considered the meals. Oh yeah, there's oatmeal in the morning. You're with the team in the afternoon, and at night you get spaghetti, or it'd be bean soup, or it'd be some big pot of something, sometimes chili. But it wasn't like sit-down meals, or it was actually fulfilling the need. So actually having that conversation and finding out about it. Find out how many players are going to be in the house. Find out how many siblings are there. Do they have people that some of the siblings come back on the weekends from college? Are there responsibilities for pets? In other words, we expect you to take the dog out once a day. Is there assigned chores? All these things, the more you know, the better, because billet kids get in situations. Now, the vast majority of billet situations are good. The vast majority. If you have to share the bathroom with a single mom and you have to walk through her bedroom to take showers and walk through her bedroom at night to use the restroom, that ain't a good situation. And I've seen it. I've seen it, okay? There are many people that are just different. They're different. So make sure you do your homework. That phone call, it can be a FaceTime, it can be a Zoom, but the more relationship you build, the much, much easier it's going to be. We billeted kids. We always had 2 when I was in the junior world locally as an owner. We always billeted 2. They had their own rec room, they had their own bedrooms, and they had their own bathroom. And we had a scheduled, meal time for dinner. And we always had cereals and oatmeals and waffles for breakfast, and they could pack their lunch for whatever they wanted to take to the rink. And we stayed out of their way as long as they kept good hours and kept things clean. We never bothered them. So you have to ask those questions and kind of get a sense of how things work with different people. All right, let's see if there's anything else I can answer fairly quick. Rodney, I can't get into which teams would be a good choice. People would kill me if I started recommending teams, especially since I work for another program that owns an NA3HL team, so probably not a good situation. Andrew, I see you from Brunswick. Good to see you on there. All right, I think I got through as many. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Do you guys look at Elite Prospects or NCSA, and how much does that help? Let me make this very, very clear. Okay, this is the last thing I'm doing tonight, I promise, okay? But this is a good one. Where do we get our information? Through the whole draft, on my phone in one hand, I've got Elite Prospects, so I can dial up Elite Prospects. And I've got multiple screens in front of me. I got 3 screens right here in front of me, 2 big ones, 2 small ones. One, I've got RinkNet up on because if they've got any experience that is in the RinkNet system, that's a back-end system that coaches and teams use, college teams, pro teams, and junior teams all use RinkNet, and there's a lot of information. If I got time, and there's many times during the draft where, hey, can we watch the video on this kid because he's still we still see him on the board. We don't have enough intel on him. So there was particular one goalie that I was looking up where I had Instat up, and I'm pulling up Instat. What Instat is, where there's video that's available. So I'm using Elite Prospects all the time. NCSA is, in my opinion, it's a vanity service in the hockey world. It might work great in football and basketball. I do not know of any junior program at this level that uses that service. I know of no Division III or Division I programs using this. Doesn't mean that there's not somebody out there. What I do know is ACHA teams use it because ACHA teams fill from whatever they can. They're filling from right out of AAA hockey. They're filling from juniors. They're filling from some low-level prep programs. But they're filling in their programs, and not the top ones. The top ones have recruiters out there, just like the Division I, Division III teams. They're out there working their butt off to get the right players. But there's a lot of ACHA programs that will take warm bodies because they don't have enough players. And those coaches will tend to jump onto something like NCSA to pick up players. So I'm not a fan of that. I look at that as a vanity service. You're paying somebody to put on the same information you can put on Elite Prospects for free. And Elite Prospects is pretty they scrutinize the information. They keep it good. So what I wanted to do, though, is you've been asking this question for a while as a group, and I'm going to see if I can do this for you. I'm going to pull up Instat, and I'm going to give you a little idea of what Instat gives you, because most of you have never seen or dealt with Instat before. So let me see if I can pull this up for you. Okay, there's Instat. All right, and my son's on there right now. Disregard that because it doesn't matter who it is. But this is the landing page. This is the overview page. You can get a good sense of nationality, birth, age, weight, all that stuff. Where his actions on the ice are. That's a heat map. But what you can do is you can go over here and you want to see assists. You can click on assists, and what the system will do is this system will build out a list for you in video form. Hang on a second there. Let me just click that out of the way. Not sure why that's there. I'm just going to get it out of the way. So this builds out a list, and this will run with all of his assists across the board. And then as soon as that play is done, it clicks right into the next one. So it just goes one after another of all the plays.
The steal, Coach Rich looking for a call.
And I'm only showing you
off
this
the near side now.
because
Metcalf toward the net. Save made, rebound chance. They
It
score!
just keeps rolling. Every piece of video that you want to see on a play.
Austin Brimmer!
And it does it for
Squeezed out of there by
penalties,
Dorfman.
it does it for
Dorfman has it.
turnovers.
He'll relay it back up top to Colson.
You can
Colson
pretty
now
much
near circle.
pull
Quick shot there by Joe Mack. Save.
You want on a player over here. You can see this. I'll pull it up a little bit more. So this is Instat. This is a huge piece here. Assisting, shooting from the slot, shootouts. So you want to see shootouts, you click on the shootout button. And what it'll do is it'll pull up whatever shootout information is on a player. I don't know if there's anything here. Oh, yeah, there is. So there he comes in, and he's going to dipsy-do, boom, score, and they won the league that year on that play. I only showed you that so you can get a sense of it. This is huge. It gives you similar players and where they're at. It shows you, different ages, different leagues, all the way up through pro, shot blocking, hits, face-offs. You pick the category, and it gives you an index rating on the player relative to that league in that year. This is like a quarterback, comparison. And remember, sometimes the QBR, 90 is good in the NFL, and the next year the number could be 120. So it's relative to the year. Their best plays, their worst plays. So if a kid is in Instat from high school, from juniors, from prep, and we've got access to it, clearly that's a tool that we're going to jump in and use. You throw that on with Elite Prospects, and then you throw that on with RinkNet. And I'm not going to pull RinkNet up because it's got some proprietary information on it right now. But those are the sources. We're not looking at NCSA and SACA. We're not looking at NASA. We're not looking at anything else. Anything that makes you pay, we're not using, okay? Any service out there that you have to pay for, we're not using. RinkNet, you can all your information is on there free. Yeah, I pay for the $10 or $8 a month for the premium service. That gives me more stuff to look at, but you as a parent don't have to pay for that. And any information you have on any of the other services, you're not paying for too. So hopefully that helped. Give me some comments on that. If you hadn't seen RinkNet before or Instat before, tell me what you think from what it just showed you, if that's something you've never seen before. How do we get our information on Instat? You don't. It gets collected. Those videos are collected by, for example, whatever league you're playing in, they put it in. If you're at a certain draft camp, I know Dubuque does it. A few other ones do it. They'll film their games in the actual camps, and that stays with the player too. So my son was drafted by Dubuque in the USHL. When he was in camp, all those games went to Instat. So I could literally go to Instat if I wanted to and pull up his games from Dubuque. Never have. Don't know if there'll ever be a need for it, but depending on which leagues you're coming from, that's the amount of information you get. So hopefully that helped you a little bit. I love playing with Instat. I'll look up players and just go through every button I can on them to find something good or something bad that's going to help influence my decision on a player. So that's a really good tool. If anybody else has seen, if that's the first time seeing Instat, let me know. I'd love to know how many of you. Maybe I'll do a whole broadcast where we just break down Instat a little bit more, so you get an idea what the professionals are using to watch your player. And that's really what it is. That's a professional tool. That's a backdoor, a behind the curtains tool that's used. It's not a secret tool, but it's not really something that parents are influencing in any way by adding their own tapes or by doing anything on that sort. So hopefully that helps. Hey, folks, man, we went a long time tonight. Thank you for sticking with us. We actually grew the audience as the night went on. I appreciate that. I had a blast with this discussion. I had a blast, answering some questions, tackling a tough discussion, which is, what do we do if we don't get tendered? What do we do? Don't give up. That's the big thing, is don't give up. Keep trying. Okay. If you're in that window where you were close, don't give up. Just keep going and plugging at it. Listen, the next few weeks are going to be in and out. I'm not sure. It's that summertime. I'm trying to pull back a little bit. I got to get up in the air and fly the airplane a little bit. And I promised my wife I'd take her on our anniversary. It's 2 years delayed because of the pandemic. We're going to be heading over to Europe in a couple weeks. Then straight from Europe to the main camp in Dallas. So I won't be doing as many broadcasts. I do believe I'll do it next week, but we're going to be slowing down for a few weeks here. Then we'll pick up as the season gets a little bit closer. So thank you so much, and have a great night. As always, if you got questions, please send them to me. If you need assistance one-on-one and you want to use our Chaos Call, our Chaos Call is easy to use. You go on and register on our website for our Chaos Call. You can speak one-on-one with me for an hour. We can work through whatever issues you got, try to answer some individual questions. The pricing's all online at juniorhockeyadvisor.com. Make sure you go on to our discussion group. Make sure you go on to our YouTube page. And please like and follow, subscribe and follow our YouTube page. We're getting real close to some milestones we need to grow this thing, to hit some different algorithms. That's the big thing now. Algorithms, everything is. So thank you so much. Have a great night. We'll see you next time.